Hi everyone, this video begins our second lecture on Epicureanism, in which we'll investigate more closely Epicurus's approach to the good life. We'll be building here on our study of Epicurean physics, epistemology, and psychology from the last lecture, where we discussed how Epicurus's materialist metaphysics and his theories of sensation and the soul lay the foundation for his philosophical system. In this lecture, we'll pivot from these foundational theories to consider their direct implications in a domain that deeply affects our lives, ethics. Our main interest here will be in the hedonistic approach to the good life that Epicurus develops. This is a view that's often misunderstood. Far from advocating a life of indulgence, Epicurus proposes an enlightened form of hedonism that emphasizes the pursuit of refined pleasures and the avoidance of pain as the path to achieving the highest form of happiness. As we'll see, not all pleasures are created equal according to Epicurus, and so we'll examine the different kinds of pleasures he identifies and why he believes some pleasures are more valuable and desirable than others for living a good life. We'll also consider the central role that friendship plays in ethics for Epicureans, and why they considered friends to be one of the most important sources of happiness in contributing to a life of tranquility and contentment. By the end of this video, we'll have a clearer understanding of how Epicurean ethics aims to provide a guide for living the best life possible, one marked by the prudent pursuit of pleasure and meaningful relationships. Before we explore the details of Epicurus's approach to the good life, let's briefly recap the core aspects of Epicurean theory as a whole. We noted in the last lecture Epicurus's firm commitment to understanding the world through the lens of nature. This naturalistic approach underpins his entire system. We also noted how Epicurus's metaphysics is decidedly materialist. He asserts that all being is material, composed of atoms moving in the void. In this universe, there's no order or teleological purpose. Everything occurs by chance. Next, turning to epistemology, or the study of knowledge, Epicurus stands as a staunch empiricist. He argues that all sense perception is true and reliable, and that knowledge is derived from the empirical world around us. This approach underscores a trust in sensory experiences as the primary source of knowledge. In psychology, Epicurus's views are consistent with his materialist metaphysics. He maintains that the matter of the soul is composed of atoms, just like everything else in the universe. This materialist psychology leads to one of his most radical assertions: the soul is not immortal. For Epicurus, the soul, integral to our sense perceptions and experiences, dissolves upon death, dispelling the notion of an afterlife or eternal soul, and also dispelling any fears in divine judgment after death. These facets of Epicurean philosophy, a materialist metaphysics, an empiricist epistemology, and a materialist psychology, are not just abstract theoretical positions. They directly inform Epicurus's ethical views and his conception of eudaimonia, or happiness, which we'll be focusing on in this lecture. As we resume our study of Epicurean ethics, let's also revisit the tetrapharmakon, or fourfold remedy, which was introduced in the last lecture. These four sayings were so highly regarded by Epicureans in the ancient world that they came to serve as a kind of prayer. They were often inscribed on wall engravings, as you can see here, or on amulets as a form of philosophical reminder or talisman. People would carry these inscriptions with them or place them in their homes as a way to keep the principles of Epicurean philosophy close at hand. In order, these principles state: don't fear God, don't worry about death, what's good is easy to get, and what's terrible is easy to endure. We examined Epicurus's reasons for making the first and second claims last time. Now we'll be exploring what he means in the third and fourth claims. One of the key texts we'll turn to here in exploring Epicurean ethics is the Principal Doctrines, a collection of 40 aphorisms or short pieces of advice composed by Epicurus himself, which distill the tenets of his philosophy and provide practical guidance for living a good life. The first two principal doctrines correspond to the first two sayings of the tetrapharmakon that we've already covered: don't fear God and don't worry about death. These doctrines offer advice that aims to dispel common fears and anxieties. The third and fourth principal doctrines correspond to the third and fourth sayings of the Tetrapharmacon. What's good is easy to get, and what's terrible is easy to endure. More precisely, Principle Doctrine 3 states, the removal of all feeling of pain is the limit of the magnitude of pleasures. Wherever a pleasurable feeling is present, for as long as it's present, there's neither a feeling of pain, nor a feeling of distress, nor both together. And Principle Doctrine 4 states, the feeling of pain does not linger continuously in the flesh. Rather, the sharpest pain is present for the shortest time. And diseases, which last a long time, involve feelings of pleasure which exceed feelings of pain. As you can see, these doctrines provide more positive guidance on how to live well. They emphasize the centrality of pleasure and the management of pain in achieving a good life. In many ways, they encapsulate the core of Epicurean ethics, which, against Plato's and Aristotle's views, argues that the human good consists in a life of pleasure. For this reason, Epicurus is generally considered one of the first philosophers to promote a hedonistic ethical framework. The comparison with Plato and Aristotle here is instructive and worth dwelling on. In Plato's vision of the good life in the Republic, the pursuit of pleasure is confined to the appetitive part of the soul, which must be carefully governed and trained. Plato emphasizes the importance of living a rationally ordered life, one in which the soul is in complete inner harmony. The pursuit of pleasure, on this view, is something to be managed, a potentially disruptive force that can derail the soul's quest for internal balance. Aristotle has a more positive stance on pleasure in the Nicomachean Ethics. He believes that activities of the soul are inseparable from activities of the body. For him, soul and body are connected in much the same way as form and matter. This leads Aristotle to view pleasure as inherently linked with a life of virtue, and thus an essential component of human well-being. Pleasure, according to Aristotle, is not just an accompaniment, but a distinguishing feature of virtuous activity. Significantly, he claims that if we don't take pleasure in acting virtuously, we're not completely virtuous. However, neither Plato nor Aristotle see pleasure as intrinsically valuable or an end in itself. While pleasure should be naturally experienced in acting virtuously for Aristotle, it's not the primary reason for acting virtuously. Pleasure in Aristotle's ethics is a byproduct of virtuous living, a bonus, not the ultimate goal of living a good life. Contrast this with Epicurus. For Epicurus, pleasure is not just a component or byproduct of the good life, it is an end in itself. In fact, he sees pleasure as the only thing that holds intrinsic value. This perspective radically reorients ethical considerations. Everything that we see as good or desirable, according to Epicurus, must be good because it contributes in some way to the experience of pleasure. In Epicurean ethics, then, pleasure occupies a central place, not as an accessory to the good life, but as its very essence and purpose. This marks a significant departure from the views of both Plato and Aristotle, and represents a distinctive approach to understanding the nature of eudaimonia. So what's Epicurus' argument against Plato and Aristotle that the good life is the life of pleasure? Recall that for Aristotle, eudaimonia lies in rational activity performed well or virtuously. On this view, the mature rational adult is the measure of what's good for human beings. Epicurus, however, takes a dramatically different approach. Instead of looking to the adult human being, he turns to the newborn infant. In his letter to Menesius, Epicurus states, "For we recognized this as our first innate good, and this is our starting point for every choice and avoidance, and we come to this by judging every good by the criterion of feeling." Let's unpack this. According to Epicurus, the human good is found in what we innately sense as good. What then do all of us naturally perceive as good? Well, the human infant is in the purest state of sensory experience, untouched and unshaped by the value systems imposed by family and culture. It's in this pristine state that we can appreciate what's naturally good. So the newborn infant for Epicurus is the true voice of nature's values. And what do these values tell us? In observing an infant in its natural state, we see that its actions are guided by the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain. This isn't a learned behavior, but an innate one, an instinctive response to the world, or what Epicurus would call a basic grasp. Moreover, this experience isn't unique to humans. It's a universal trait we observe in all sentient animals in the natural world. Every creature is driven by the same fundamental impulse to seek pleasure and avoid pain. From these observations, Epicurus derives his pleasure principle. The human good lies in the experience of pleasure. So for Epicurus, the good life isn't defined by rationality, virtue, or the development of the soul in either the Platonic or the Aristotelian sense. Instead, it's characterized by the simple, natural pursuit of pleasure. This hedonistic principle, drawn from the uncorrupted experiences of the newborn infant, forms the basis of Epicurus's ethical theory. But there are also, for Epicurus, better and worse ways in which we can engage in the pursuit of pleasure. And it turns out, as for Plato and Aristotle, that understanding the nature of our desires is pivotal in Epicureanism to achieving a tranquil, happy life. Epicurus provides a clear delineation of desires here into three types in Principal Doctrine 29. Of desires, he says, some are natural and necessary, some natural and not necessary, and some neither natural nor necessary but occurring as a result of a groundless opinion. Again, let's unpack this. First, natural and necessary desires. These are the desires that are essential for our well-being and survival. They include basic needs such as food, shelter, and health. Epicurus argues that fulfilling these desires is crucial for our happiness, as they directly contribute to our physical comfort and freedom from pain. These desires are universally found in all humans, he holds, and are easily satisfied. Second, we have natural but unnecessary desires. Although these desires are natural to humans, they are not essential for our basic survival or happiness. They include desires for expensive clothing and lavish houses. Epicurus views these desires with caution. While they can seem in some way to enhance our lives, their pursuit should not disrupt our inner peace and lead to the negative consequence of feeling anxious or distressed if we cannot satisfy them. The fulfillment of these desires is not required or necessary for a happy life. Third, we have unnatural and unnecessary desires. These are desires that are often insatiable. They do not contribute to our well-being and, in fact, can run against it. Such desires include the pursuit of power, fame, and excessive wealth. They are typically driven by social pressures and false beliefs, and Epicurus warns that these desires lead to endless dissatisfaction because they're not grounded in our natural needs. Constantly chasing after such desires generally brings more strife than satisfaction, as they can never be fully satisfied and distract us from the true sources of happiness. This delineation of desires serves as a guide for living well according to Epicurus. By focusing on fulfilling our natural and necessary desires, we lay the foundation for a contented life. By recognizing and moderating our natural but unnecessary desires, and by avoiding unnatural and unnecessary ones, we protect our tranquility from the disturbances that come from endless wanting. Understanding this framework of desires enables us to critically evaluate our pursuits and choices, steering us toward the pleasures that truly enrich our lives while avoiding those that lead to dissatisfaction and distress. It's this sophisticated analysis of desire that underpins Epicurean ethics. Once we observe this, we can see how Epicurean hedonism isn't a license for unlimited self-indulgence, as some of Epicurus's less charitable interpreters have believed. Unlimited self-indulgence is the sort of hedonism we saw Callicles argue for in Plato's Gorgias, back in Unit 1 of this course. But with an understanding of Epicurus's analysis of desires now in view, it's clear he isn't in any way endorsing a Calliclean form of hedonism. The pleasure Callicles wants is unlimited pleasure, typically at the expense of others. It's more accurate to view Epicurus, by contrast, as promoting an enlightened form of hedonism that involves a more prudent pursuit of pleasure. As he puts it in his letter to Menesius, in section 131, When we say that pleasure is the goal, we do not mean the pleasures of the profligate or the pleasures of consumption, as some believe, either from ignorance and disagreement or from deliberate misinterpretation. But rather, what we believe in is the lack of pain in the body and disturbance in the soul. Epicurus is very careful here to qualify his pleasure principle and give us clear advice on how to maximize the attainment of pleasure. For Epicurus, the good life isn't a matter of indulging in the pleasures of the moment. Instead, the highest form of pleasure is the absence of all pain. This is a sort of static condition. We can observe this by looking again at Principal Doctrine 3, where Epicurus claims that the removal of all feeling of pain is the limit of the magnitude of pleasures. Similarly, in Principal Doctrine 8, he states that while all pleasures are good, insofar as they're pleasurable, not all pleasures are choice-worthy. But why exactly aren't all pleasures worth choosing? On what basis does Epicurus distinguish between kinds of pleasure? In Principal Doctrine 18, he offers a profound insight into his doctrine of pleasure. Epicurus states here that as soon as the feeling of pain produced by want is removed, pleasure in the flesh will not increase, but is only varied. This leads us to a crucial distinction in Epicurean thought between static and kinetic pleasures. Static pleasure refers to a tranquil state of painless sensation. It's not an experience of intense pleasure or as much pleasure as possible, but a state where you have as much as you need to be free from pain and want. Not feeling hungry, for example, is a static pleasure. It's a feeling of contentment, of being at peace without lacking anything. This kind of pleasure is significant for Epicurus because it represents a sustainable, long-term state of well-being. Kinetic pleasure, on the other hand, involves positive, often short-lived sensory stimulations. These stimulations, like the satisfaction of eating while we're hungry, are how we commonly think of pleasure. Epicurus does not deny that such pleasures are enjoyable. The problem, however, is that they're transient, and thus they shouldn't be our main aim in the pursuit of happiness. The aim for Epicurus is to achieve a condition of static pleasure. In this condition, we're not tormented by a constant desire for more and varied pleasures. We pursue just enough kinetic pleasure to achieve static pleasure and then enjoy that tranquility. Focusing solely on maximizing kinetic pleasures, Epicurus cautions, does not really increase your net total of pleasure. In fact, it can be counterproductive. This is because an excess of kinetic pleasures can lead to a dependence on their continued availability. We might become more fearful of losing these pleasures, more vulnerable to misfortune, and thus less tranquil. Epicurus's point here is subtle yet powerful. By always chasing new pleasures, we can inadvertently reduce our overall happiness. So Epicureanism preaches an ethics of frugality and tranquility. This isn't to say that occasional feasts and indulgences are forbidden. They can be enjoyed sometimes, as long as one's choices are oriented primarily toward maintaining a serene and contented state of being. This approach, Epicurus argues, is the true path to a life of sustained pleasure and happiness. And crucially for Epicurus, we don't walk this path alone. To wrap up our discussion here, let's consider the importance of friendship in the Epicurean understanding of the good life. In Epicurean ethics, friendship is not just a social nicety, it's a crucial element of human happiness. In Principal Doctrine 27, Epicurus famously states, "Of the things which wisdom provides for the blessedness of one's whole life, by far the greatest is the possession of friendship." But why is friendship so important for Epicurus? To begin with, let's recall the enlightened form of hedonism Epicurus promotes. It's about focusing on satisfying natural and necessary desires, and managing pain effectively. This is why the fourth saying of the Tetrapharmacon claims that what's terrible is easy to endure. Once we've accustomed ourselves to experiencing pleasure through the satisfaction of basic desires, we'll see how easy it is to achieve static pleasure and contentment. Friendship plays a further vital role in this context. Friends provide us with assistance in meeting our needs and desires and offer comfort when we're low or struggling. They share in our joys, enhancing our pleasure. In times of hardship, it's the support of friends that makes what's terrible easier to endure, as they help us manage pain and maintain a focus on what truly matters. With an Epicurean friend, we can feel confident that they're not consumed by unhealthy, limitless desires that lead them to manipulate or betray us. We can rely on such a person to help us in satisfying our needs. The bond of friendship, on this view, is based on trust, mutual aid, and joint contentment. Epicurus prized the good of friendship so highly that he established his own school of philosophy, the garden, as a closed community on a private plot of land, where he and his friends retreated from the anxieties of city life to live together and support each other. The garden was a place where Epicurean friends could engage in philosophical discussions, share meals, and provide support, embodying a life of simple pleasures. So friendship for Epicurus is key to living a good life, since it's through friendship that we find the most profound pleasures, manage pain more effectively, and navigate the world with security and goodwill. In this video, we've examined Epicurus' approach to the good life and his ethical views in his principal doctrines. Let's recap the key points we've covered. We discussed Epicurus' argument that the human good consists in a life of pleasure. Unlike the views of Plato and Aristotle, pleasure for Epicurus is not merely a component of the good life, it's the ultimate goal. Epicurus thus promotes a hedonistic view of happiness, though we also discussed how this is best understood as an enlightened form of hedonism. A hedonism that focuses on the pursuit of simple pleasures and the avoidance of pain, rather than a life of indulgence. We noted in this connection how Epicurus categorizes desires into three types: natural and necessary, natural but unnecessary, and unnatural and unnecessary. Understanding and managing these desires is crucial for living a good life in Epicureanism. This led us to the distinction between static pleasures and kinetic pleasures. Epicurus argues that our aim in seeking happiness is to achieve a condition of static pleasure, where we're content and at peace. Epicurus also holds that pain can be managed effectively once we orient our lives around enjoying static pleasures and by cultivating friendships that provide us with support and comfort. As a result, friendship has a central role to play in the good life in Epicureanism, and the communal living practiced in the Epicurean garden exemplifies this role. In the next video, we'll note how many of these central ideas in Epicurean ethics can be found in the work of a later, highly influential Epicurean thinker, the Roman philosopher and poet, Lucretius.